The email buzzed on my phone at 2:47 a.m., piercing the silence of a long, restless night. 2 days had passed since they fired me. 2 days since Sarah, the woman I had once called my partner in every sense, stood at the door of my office and watched me pack my things without saying a word. No apology, no acknowledgement of the 8 years we'd spent building Mallister Enterprises from the ground up. Just silence. And now this email, with its corporate tone, sterile and cold. Ryan, we've reconsidered. The board feels your departure was premature. Resume your position on Monday. We'll discuss terms. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. My mind raced. It felt like a lifetime ago that Sarah and I were sitting together in our first board meeting, full of dreams about where we'd take the company. Back then, I was the one shaping the technology, pushing us to the forefront of innovation, while she managed operations and strategy. It worked. We worked. But now, after everything that had happened in the past few months, this message, this request for me to come back, felt like a sick joke. She had voted to terminate me 3 days ago, along with the rest of the board, all based on fabricated performance issues. Sarah, the woman I had once believed was my equal, had made sure my exit was as clean as possible, thinking that would be the end of it. She couldn't have been more wrong. I sat there for 5 full minutes, staring at the message, fighting the urge to call her, to shout, to demand an explanation. But instead, I typed 4 words that changed everything. Not happening. I'm done. The decision felt final, yet freeing. What Sarah didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent the last 6 months preparing for this moment. While she was jetting off to Silicon Valley, attending board dinners, and keeping up the facade of a perfect CEO, I had been quietly building something they never saw coming. By Monday, I wouldn't be just out of a job. I would be the new CEO of Echelon Technologies, Mallister Enterprises' biggest competitor, with every innovation I had developed locked away in my mind, and a team of engineers who had quietly followed me as I planned my exit. The signs had been there for months, of course. The small changes in Sarah's behavior, her phone face down during dinner, late nights at the office that smelled of expensive cologne when she came home, the meetings that started happening at resorts I wasn't invited to. I had grown suspicious, but instead of confronting her directly, I did what any good technologist would do. I gathered data. I had to know the truth, and what I found was far more than I could have ever imagined. The day I discovered what Sarah was truly up to started like any other. I was sitting in my office, sifting through emails, and trying to make sense of the chaos that had consumed Mallister Enterprises in the past few months. There were too many things that didn't add up, decisions that seemed to undermine everything we had built, subtle shifts that I had been ignoring. But deep down, I knew something was off. The day Sarah and I first met, there was no mistaking the connection. We were both driven, hungry for success, willing to sacrifice everything to build something world-changing. But now, it felt like I was no longer a part of her world. It wasn't just the late nights at the office or the endless meetings with consultants who couldn't tell the difference between a line of code and a business strategy. It was the way she started to close herself off, the way she'd become more distant, like I was a necessary evil in her life instead of the partner I thought I was. The cracks had started to show a year ago when she began pushing the company into markets we weren't ready for. She began sidelining my opinions, overriding my decisions, and making strategic choices that felt more like power plays than business decisions. I could feel my influence slipping away with every board meeting, every project canceled, every decision made behind my back. But it was the AI platform that did it. The one I had spent the last year designing, building, pouring every ounce of my expertise into. The one I knew would put Mallister on the map as an industry leader for years to come. And then, 2 weeks before the scheduled launch, Sarah pulled the plug without so much as a discussion. No warning, no consultation, no acknowledgement of the 2 years of work we had invested into it. The announcement was made casually during a board meeting, as if it was just another update. I was sitting there stunned as she moved on to the next agenda item without a second thought. After that, everything changed. I cornered her in her office, demanding an explanation. "Sarah, what the hell just happened? That project was everything. We were days from launch. The consultants ran the numbers, she said, not even looking up from her laptop. It wasn't aligning with our timeline. We need a faster ROI. The same consultants who couldn't even explain what we were building. The same consultants who'd been steering Sarah's decisions for months. The same consultants who had convinced her that I was the problem. I stood there, speechless, as the weight of her words sank in. Sarah had stopped seeing me as her equal, as the man who helped build Mallister from the ground up. She saw me as an obstacle. And in that moment, I realized how much she had changed. How much we had changed. That night, I did something I had never done before. I started gathering evidence. I began combing through emails, taking note of every meeting I was excluded from, every decision that seemed to push me further out of the company. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to understand why everything had gone so wrong. The more I dug, the more I found. It wasn't just about business strategies anymore. It was about something far darker. Sarah was no longer just making poor decisions, she was actively undermining me. And that's when I started to notice it. The small things, the little inconsistencies, the patterns that didn't match up. My suspicions were growing, but I had to know the truth. I had to know if it was really as bad as it seemed. So I started tracking her, quietly, subtly. And what I found, well, it shattered everything. The more I dug, the deeper I found myself sinking into a hole I hadn't expected. At first, I thought it was just the stress of the job getting to me, maybe some paranoia creeping in after months of being sidelined. But when I started to piece things together, I realized just how wrong I had been. What Sarah had done wasn't just neglectful or short-sighted, it was calculated. And the more I uncovered, the clearer it became that I wasn't just being pushed out of Mallister Enterprises, I was being replaced. It started with the server logs. I was in my office one Thursday evening, working late as usual, when I noticed something strange. Our internal systems had flagged an unauthorized login. Normally, this would have been nothing more than a minor glitch, but something about it didn't sit right. The IP address wasn't from any of our office locations. Curious, I traced it back to a luxury hotel downtown, one I knew Sarah had frequented a few times. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just a mistake. But as I sat there staring at the screen, something told me I needed to dig deeper. The next step was the security footage. It wasn't something I'd ever bothered with before, but I knew I had to act fast. I pulled up the recordings from the office parking garage, and sure enough, Sarah's car had left at 6:15 p.m., right before the supposed board dinner. But instead of heading to the restaurant, she drove straight to that hotel. My heart sank. Something was wrong. This wasn't a coincidence. I needed to know more, and that's when I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I hired a private investigator. Evelyn Morgan, a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate espionage and marital infidelity, came highly recommended. I gave her the details, Sarah's schedule, the meetings I wasn't invited to, the odd behavior I'd been noticing. And within a few weeks, she came back with a file that made everything clear. Sarah wasn't just having an affair. She was having an affair with Andrew Reed, the lead consultant she'd brought in 18 months ago. The same consultant who had been systematically advising her on strategies that overruled my technical decisions. The same consultant who had played a significant role in undermining my authority at Mallister. They had been planning my removal from the company for months, long before the termination was even on the table. Evelyn's file was filled with damning evidence, photos of Sarah and Andrew together at hotels, text messages between them discussing my performance issues, and worst of all, emails detailing how they were planning to replace me with Andrew. It was all right there in black and white. They had been plotting my downfall while I was still working tirelessly to save Mallister from itself. I should have felt betrayed, devastated even. But all I felt was clarity. The pieces had fallen into place. Sarah and Andrew weren't just trying to push me out. They were trying to replace me entirely, to rewrite the history of Mallister without me in it. It stung, but it also sparked something inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time, the drive to take back control. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them destroy everything I had worked for. No, I was going to build something better. I was going to take my skills, my innovations, and my team, and I was going to show them what real leadership looked like. I spent the next few months quietly preparing. I reached out to old colleagues, friends from the industry, people I knew I could trust. I began planting seeds, talking to investors who shared my vision, and looking for a way to make my exit from Mallister. The plan was taking shape, and once I had the right offer on the table, I would make my move. And I would make sure Sarah and her new partner in crime would regret ever thinking they could do this to me. The months that followed were some of the most intense of my life. Every move had to be calculated. Every conversation had to be discreet. I couldn't afford to make a misstep. Sarah and Andrew had been so sure of their plan, so convinced that they could simply erase me from Mallister Enterprises and continue building the company without me. But what they didn't realize was that I was already ahead of them. Every day, I worked quietly, planning my next move, building the future I had been denied. It started with the phone call I received from Jack Morgan, the founder of Echelon Technologies. Jack was an industry veteran, someone I had known for years but hadn't worked with directly. He was getting older and considering retirement. He wanted someone to take over his company, someone who could bring fresh ideas and new leadership to take Echelon to the next level. When we met for lunch, I told him part of the truth, that I was being forced out of Mallister, that I had a vision for technology that could revolutionize the industry, and that I was looking for a new challenge. He listened intently, asked sharp questions, and then made me an offer that took my breath away. He wanted me to become the CEO of Echelon Technologies with complete operational control, equity in the company, and a development budget that would allow me to build the innovations that had been suppressed at Mallister. I had expected to negotiate, but Jack's offer was everything I had been hoping for. It was everything I needed. The catch? Jack wanted me to bring my team with me. The engineers I had worked with over the years, the ones who had been sidelined, ignored, and underappreciated at Mallister, the ones who still believed in me, who knew what we could accomplish if we were free from the corporate politics. I didn't hesitate. I knew exactly what I had to do. I reached out to them in secret, one by one, under the radar. It wasn't about making a big announcement or creating a spectacle. It was about quietly securing the future of the team I had built. The engineers were frustrated, just like I had been. And when I spoke to them about the opportunity at Echelon, the response was overwhelming. They were ready to move, ready to leave Mallister behind. They believed in the vision we had started together, and they believed in me. Over the course of the next few months, 20 engineers agreed to leave Mallister with me and join Echelon. But it wasn't just the people. I had one more piece of the puzzle to complete. The AI platform that Sarah had killed, the one I had poured everything into for over a year, was still in my head, still unfinished. I couldn't let it go. The work was mine, and I wasn't about to let her destroy it without giving it the chance it deserved. So I worked in secret, using my personal resources, my own equipment, and the knowledge I had gained over the years. I rebuilt the platform from scratch, only better. It wasn't just a continuation of the original work. It was a refinement, a next-level version of everything I had envisioned. By the time Sarah and the board finally terminated me, I was ready. They thought they had won. They thought they had rid themselves of the problem. But what they didn't realize was that they had just set me free. I signed the separation agreement without reading it carefully. Sarah thought I had given up, that I was walking away defeated. What she didn't know was that my lawyers had already gone over the terms, and they'd found loopholes and ambiguities that would make the non-compete clause unenforceable. I packed my office that afternoon, the same office where I had spent countless hours building Mallister Enterprises into what it was. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was nothing left to say. Sarah didn't speak to me as I left. The next morning, I walked into my new office at Echelon Technologies as the CEO. I had my team, my vision, and my chance to do things my way. The future was finally mine to shape. Monday morning came faster than I expected. The press release went out at 8 a.m., announcing that I was the new CEO of Echelon Technologies. By the time I had finished my first cup of coffee, my phone was ringing off the hook. Industry contacts, former colleagues, reporters all wanting to know the story behind my sudden departure from Mallister and the even more sudden move to Echelon. Everyone wanted to know why I had left one of the most successful tech companies in the world to take over a smaller competitor. But I wasn't interested in their questions. Not yet. I had a bigger task ahead of me. I met Jack Morgan at the entrance to Echelon's headquarters. He looked like a proud father as he shook my hand, a broad grin on his face. "Ready to change the world?" he asked. "Already started," I replied, my voice steady, calm. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of certainty, of purpose. It was a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. At Mallister, I had been questioning everything, wondering where I fit in, what my role was. Now I was at the helm of something new, something that I could shape from the ground up. Echelon wasn't just a company. It was an opportunity to do things right, to lead in a way that I hadn't been able to at Mallister. By noon, the fallout from my departure was starting to hit Mallister Enterprises. I had been expecting it, but the speed with which things started to unravel still took me by surprise. The engineers I had convinced to follow me to Echelon, my team, had already begun submitting their resignation letters. It was coordinated, deliberate, and effective. 20 engineers, all at once, resigned from Mallister and pledged their loyalty to me. Sarah didn't see it coming. She couldn't have. She had been too focused on her own plans, on controlling the board, on appeasing the consultants who were making decisions, without understanding the technology. Within hours, Mallister's stock price took a dive. The investors started calling. The clients started pulling back. They had lost the very people who had built their success. They had lost their technical leadership, their future. The board tried to patch things up, sending desperate emails, making frantic calls, but it was too late. The damage was done. Meanwhile, at Echelon, I was already putting the pieces into place. I spent my first few days meeting with my new team, reinforcing the vision we shared, and setting clear goals for where we were headed. There was no time to waste. We were going to launch the innovations that Mallister had held back. The AI platform that had been my brainchild was going to be finished, and it was going to change everything. I worked tirelessly, guiding the engineers, shaping the future of the company. My first few weeks at Echelon were a blur of meetings, development sessions, and strategic planning. Every decision felt like a step forward, a step closer to proving that I could lead, that I could build something better. The sense of purpose that had been missing for so long was back. This was what I was meant to do. At Mallister, Sarah and the board were scrambling. They didn't understand what had just happened. They hadn't realized the magnitude of the impact my departure would have. They were watching their empire crumble, and all they could do was try to fix the pieces I had taken with me. But none of that mattered to me. My focus was clear. Build something great at Echelon, make it a success, and show the world exactly what Sarah and the board had overlooked. What they had failed to understand was that it wasn't just the company that had made me. It was my ability to lead, to innovate, and to build something extraordinary from nothing. Now, I had my chance to prove it, and I would make sure I didn't waste it. It didn't take long for the dust to settle, but when it did, I was more than ready for what came next. The first few weeks at Echelon were a whirlwind. I had the team, I had the technology, and I had the control I needed to start pushing forward. We were no longer bogged down by corporate politics, by the constant interference of people who didn't understand the core of what we were building. Echelon was a blank slate, a place where I could finally execute the vision I had been sidelined from for so long. The AI platform that Sarah had killed, it wasn't just a project for me. It was personal. The work I'd put into it wasn't something I could let go of. It had been my baby, my pride, and the potential it had to revolutionize the industry was still as clear to me as the day I first started building it. It wasn't just about proving Sarah wrong. It was about showing everyone that the innovations I had pushed for were the future. As soon as we got the team settled and the processes in place, I made the platform my priority. My engineers dove into it with the same passion they had shown for years at Mallister, and together, we rebuilt it. We didn't just finish what had been started. We made it better, faster, more efficient. We refined the algorithms, optimized the code, and pushed the boundaries of what we thought was possible. And as we worked, the excitement around the project grew. The energy was palpable. I could feel it, and I knew the rest of the industry would too. But things were not going as smoothly for Sarah and Mallister. The cracks that had been forming in their empire were now wide open. The engineers I had brought with me weren't the only ones who had been frustrated. The entire technical team at Mallister was in turmoil. The loss of the key players who had made their products successful had caused a ripple effect throughout the company. The consultants who had convinced Sarah to cancel my project and push me out were now under scrutiny. Board members were scrambling to figure out how to save face, and the stock price continued to drop as the company struggled to recover. It wasn't just the loss of talent that hurt Mallister. It was the loss of their vision. The AI platform we had built was set to transform the industry, but without me and without my team, they were going to struggle to rebuild what we had. The news of my departure had already hit the media, and the story of the mass exodus of engineers followed shortly after. The headlines were a constant reminder of what Mallister had lost. I had made the right choice, and as the weeks went by, it became clearer than ever. My vision was starting to come to life at Echelon. Clients who had been hesitant to work with us before started reaching out, eager to partner with a company that was now seen as an innovator, a real competitor. The technology we had developed wasn't just cutting edge, it was changing the way people saw the future of tech. We were on the brink of something big, and I could feel the momentum building every day. And then, the first big breakthrough came. Our AI platform, the one Sarah had killed, was ready for launch. We were about to present it to the world, and I knew it was going to shake things up. I spent sleepless nights preparing for the launch, making sure every detail was perfect. I wasn't just fighting for the success of the project, I was fighting to prove that I was right all along. The platform wasn't just the future, it was my future, and I was ready for it to change everything. As we prepared for the announcement, I could already hear the whispers from Mallister. I could feel Sarah watching from the sidelines, knowing she had underestimated me. But this time, I wasn't looking back. The future was mine now, and I was going to make sure everyone saw exactly what I was capable of. The launch day arrived, and with it came a wave of nervous anticipation that I couldn't shake off. It felt like everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was about to come to fruition. The AI platform was more than just a product. It was a statement. It was proof that I hadn't just been a cog in the machine at Mallister. I was the driving force behind the innovation that would change the industry. And now, as the new CEO of Echelon Technologies, I was about to show the world what we were capable of. We had spent weeks perfecting the platform, ensuring it was flawless in every way. The team was confident, but I could see the excitement in their eyes. They knew how big this was. The press release went out at exactly 9 a.m., announcing the launch and the groundbreaking capabilities of our AI technology. I knew the media would be watching closely, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as the first stories started trickling in. The reviews were glowing, with experts hailing it as a game changer. I had been right all along. By the time the sun set that evening, Echelon was everywhere. The industry was buzzing about our platform, and the early feedback we received was nothing short of extraordinary. The clients who had been hesitant just weeks ago were now lining up to work with us. The world had taken notice, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. We had done it. But even as the success of the launch settled in, I couldn't ignore the fact that Mallister was sinking faster than I had anticipated. The company I had helped build was now floundering without its core team. The exodus of engineers had been a blow they hadn't seen coming, and now they were struggling to fill the gaps. The AI platform that they had killed was now thriving at Echelon, and they were left scrambling to catch up. The stock price, which had already taken a hit, dropped further as the news of Echelon's success spread. I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction in watching their downfall, but I didn't dwell on it. I had moved on, and I had no intention of looking back. My focus was on Echelon, on the future we were building. I had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. That night, after a long day of meetings and celebrations, I sat alone in my office, reflecting on how far I had come. I thought about the days when I had first started at Mallister, full of ambition and optimism, just like Sarah. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. The trust had eroded, and the partnership had dissolved. The woman I had once called my equal had become a stranger, and the company I had helped build had become a place that no longer valued my contributions. But none of that mattered anymore. I had made my choice, and it was clear I had made the right one. Echelon was thriving, and I was leading it. I had my team, I had my vision, and I was finally in control. The future was ours, and there was no turning back. As I looked out over the city from my office window, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. What once felt like a failure had turned into the greatest success of my life. And as much as Sarah and Mallister had tried to erase me, I had just written my own future. And it was going to be one they could never take away from me. The next few months were a blur of growth, success, and relentless forward momentum. The AI platform we had launched wasn't just a one-off success. It became the cornerstone of everything Echelon stood for. Our clients were raving about the technology, and the word began to spread that Echelon Technologies was no longer just a competitor in the industry. We were the industry's future. The platform was already being integrated into major corporations, and our team was pushing the boundaries of what we could do next. It felt like we were on the verge of something huge. But amid the excitement, I couldn't escape the nagging sense that something was still unfinished. Despite all the victories, there was still a part of me that hadn't fully let go of what had happened with Mallister. It wasn't the company I missed. It wasn't the fame or the wealth. What I missed was the partnership, the bond I had shared with Sarah, the woman I had trusted with my life. In the beginning, we were unstoppable, a perfect team. We had built an empire together. But now I was watching that empire crumble without me, and part of me couldn't help but wonder if it could have been different. I wasn't looking to repair the relationship. I had made peace with the fact that it was beyond saving. But part of me wanted to make sure Sarah understood that the destruction of Mallister wasn't just about me leaving. It wasn't just about my departure triggering the downfall. It was about the decisions she made, the choices she allowed others to influence, and the way she had treated the very foundation of what we had built together. She had chosen ambition over partnership, power over people, and in doing so, she had sealed Mallister's fate. One morning, a few months after the launch, I received an unexpected email from Sarah. Just one line, "I'm sorry for everything." I sat there for a long time, staring at the words. I wasn't sure what I had expected from her, but this wasn't it. I had imagined her reaching out to explain, to justify her actions. I had imagined a confrontation, a final showdown where everything could be laid bare. But this felt like an admission of defeat, and I wasn't sure if it was what I wanted. I thought about responding, maybe sending a few words back, explaining how things had unfolded, but then I realized something. I didn't owe her anything anymore. I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need her to acknowledge the betrayal. I had already moved on. My life, my success, and my future were no longer tied to Mallister, to Sarah, or to the past we had shared. So I did what I had learned to do in these months. I let it go. I deleted the email without responding. Echelon continued to thrive. We attracted new investors, expanded our offerings, and solidified our place as a leader in the tech world. But for me, it wasn't just about the success anymore. It was about freedom. The freedom to lead on my own terms, the freedom to create without constraints, and the freedom to walk away from the toxic politics that had suffocated me at Mallister. Months passed, and with each passing day, I grew more and more confident in the path I had chosen. Sarah, for all her ambitions and manipulations, could no longer touch me. She had tried to tear me down, to erase me from her life and from the company we had built. But instead, she had created the very force that would ultimately leave her behind. I knew that Mallister Enterprises would never be the same. The cracks had already begun to show, and despite their efforts to fill them, it was too late. The leadership that had once been so strong was now fractured. They had lost the people who mattered, and no amount of recovery could change that. Meanwhile, Echelon continued to rise. As I stood on the balcony of my office, looking out over the city, I realized that this was just the beginning. The company I was building wasn't just about technology. It was about resilience. It was about proving that no matter how many times you're knocked down, you can always rise again. And this time, I was doing it on my own terms. 6 months had passed since the launch of our AI platform, and every day felt like a new milestone. Echelon Technologies was no longer just a competitor to Mallister. It was the new standard. Clients were coming to us for solutions that Mallister could no longer provide, and our growth was explosive. The engineers who had followed me here, the ones who had seen the potential in me when no one else had, were now driving the innovations that were making Echelon a household name. We were leading the charge in the tech world, and it felt like we could conquer anything. But success, as sweet as it was, didn't come without its challenges. We had made it to the top, but staying there required constant vigilance, constant innovation. Every decision, every move we made had to be calculated. And as much as I enjoyed the victories, I had learned the hard way not to let my guard down. Mallister's fall wasn't just a result of my departure. It was a culmination of poor leadership, misaligned priorities, and an unwillingness to adapt. I was determined not to let Echelon make the same mistakes. That's when the call came. It was from an old contact, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a former colleague from Mallister who had stayed on long after I left. "I've been watching what you've been doing at Echelon," he said. "I wanted to tell you that you were right. We were wrong. Sarah was wrong. And now Mallister is about to implode." I wasn't surprised. The signs had been there from the beginning. When I left, I knew Mallister would struggle without me, but I hadn't expected it to be this bad. The loss of so many key people, the exodus of talent, was something they couldn't recover from. The tech they had relied on for years was now outdated, and without the team that had built it, they were lost. Sarah was still at the helm, but her control was slipping. The board was restless, and whispers of a leadership change were already starting to surface. "Do you think she'll survive this?" my former colleague asked. I paused before answering. I thought about everything Sarah had put me through, about the way she had systematically destroyed our partnership for the sake of her ambition. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need to answer that question anymore. Her fate was no longer my concern. I had my own company to run, my own legacy to build. The past was the past, and as much as I had once believed in Mallister, I had to let it go. "I don't know," I finally said, "but I do know this. I'm not going back." And that was it. The final chapter of Mallister and Sarah was written. I hung up the phone, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The closure I had been searching for was finally here. I had built Echelon from the ground up with a team that believed in me, and together we had created something unstoppable. There was no more looking back. That afternoon, I walked into my office and looked out over the skyline, feeling a sense of pride that I had never experienced before. This was my vision, my success. It wasn't just about proving I could make it without Sarah or Mallister. It was about proving to myself that I could create something better, something that was mine. As the sun set, I knew that Echelon was just getting started. The future was bright, and I was ready to take it on, one challenge at a time. There was no limit to what we could accomplish now, and I was the one leading the charge. And as for Sarah, I couldn't help but wonder if she realized yet that her biggest mistake had been trying to push me out of the very company I had helped build. Now, I was building my own empire, and it was just the beginning. In life, never underestimate the power of resilience and self-belief. When faced with betrayal or setbacks, don't let them define you. Use those experiences as fuel to build something even greater. Trust in your abilities, stay focused on your goals, and surround yourself with people who share your vision. Sometimes, the hardest challenges lead to the greatest opportunities. Don't be afraid to walk away from toxic situations or relationships that hold you back. In the end, it's not about what you lose, it's about what you build in the aftermath. Stay true to yourself and success will follow.